I think there's a kind of acceptance across the world that education is a particular thing, which it used to be, but it is no longer. If all we do as an education system is replicate what the generation before us knew, we are absolutely stuffed as a society. We've now made it clear that if we stop exams, the world doesn't stop spinning. If we actually look at kids learning, they can do it from home. But what's important is that the kids are interested and fascinated. For me, I'm 61 and I learn something new every day. I love finding out things. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't go, wow, because something amazes me. That's what education is. And the best gift we can give to any young person is to give them the wow. And that's where we've got to reset education and put the power of education back into the person, not into the system.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today? Hello and welcome to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the 95th episode, no less. So just let that sink in for a little bit. If this is your first time listening to the QT podcast, you have a whole trove to go back and listen to. And if you've been here with us since episode 1, then thank you for staying with us. I am delighted to be welcoming on our guest today, a man called Dave Harris. Now, just before I let Dave do the talking, let me just tell you a little bit about Dave so you have some context there. Dave is the managing director of Independent Thinking, which is an incredible organization that seeks to challenge leaders and educators, prompting them to go further, to think more and do more for their communities and their students. The founder of Independent Thinking, Ian Gilbert, was a guest on this very podcast in the spring of last year, of 2021, and following that, joined us as a keynote speaker at the first Love Tutoring Festival in June 2021. Dave and fellow Independent Thinking associate Nina Jackson will be joining us as keynote speakers for this month's Love Tutoring Festival 2, which starts on Monday, the 24th of January. Now, I'm not sure I could do Dave justice with an introduction, as his level of expertise, his skill, his experience, I would say cannot be easily summarized, such is its breadth. So what I will try and do in the next 25 minutes is to allow Dave to display his charm, his wit, and knowledge on the area of change management, inspiring learners, thinking differently, and some more topics. Many of the topics that Dave will be speaking about during his keynote in the coming few weeks. So, Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there, nice to meet you, Odone. Thank you for the very positive intro.
That's quite all right. I hope that's given our listeners a little bit of a background to you. So our first question, those of you who've been with us for the past 95 episodes will know, is what is your why, Dave?
I suppose my why is very similar to that we claim as the company, which is there is another way. Now, I might sound a little bit bizarre, but we say there is another way purely because we don't actually believe that education is something that we should be following a prescription for, that there is a set thing to do. But the only thing we do believe is that there is another way of doing it, that we don't have to do it the way that everybody else is. And I think there's a kind of acceptance across the world that education is a particular thing, which it used to be, but it is no longer. So, in other words, I guess that there is no doubt that education is not actually fulfilling the needs we as society have of it, not just in Britain, but across the world. And I think that there needs to be a reboot as to what we actually want from education. And I think that's at the heart of anything we do, because otherwise we're just kind of trying to reproduce something which is just simply not appropriate.
Yeah, and I imagine there will be listeners right now nodding their heads at this idea that education used to be something, but I'm sure there will be some who don't really know what this concept is. Could you go a little bit more into? You mentioned there's a perception that education used to be a certain thing, and it may not be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of if you it's really interesting if you go back to the really foundations of education, the first bit, it was actually based around curiosity. People used to have collections of unusual things which people used to go and visit and see, and that was about getting people interested in what was there. We then moved into the industrial society, and the industrial society, which is when formal education came out, had some very set rules. It was about producing things, about making stuff. It was organized in a very hierarchical way. If you look at schools, they are based very similarly to the structure of a mill. There is, you have a boss, you have two deputies, you have four at the next level, and the approach to it was very much about trying to replicate the information you needed the young people to have to work in society. So in other words, education's function was to provide information for kids, for young people to become productive young adults. Great, totally understand that. The issue is that there is nobody who believes that we're still in the industrial society. The industrial society has changed. We are in the end of a transition period, moving into a new kind of society. We no longer have the same rules or the needs for people to produce things. Of course, we have to make things, but we have now much more automated. We know that we can ask someone to do something the other side of the world, and it can be printed over here. So the idea that we are working in a community to produce an output is no longer there. So for us to carry on, assuming that education is still the same, the kids still need to learn the same stuff they did 50 years ago, is frankly lunatic. It kind of doesn't make any sense at all for us to think that we need to learn, the 10 longest rivers in the world. Why would you need to know that? There might have been an argument, questionable if there was, but an argument 50 years ago that that's the case. What we now need is our young people to have the desire to learn, because the information is at the end of their fingertips. They can ask Siri what the 10 longest rivers in the world are. Remembering it's not the point. The fact is, what do you do with it, and why do you want to do something with it? Which is why there needs to be a reboot on education, not thinking about us replicating the information in the previous generation. If all we do as an education system is replicate what the generation before us knew, we are absolutely stuffed as a society, because our only way to develop is to change that. And unless we see education as an evolution, and I guess revolution, then I think we really are in very troubled areas as a society.
Yeah. So how have the goalposts of exactly what you're explaining? How have the goalposts of thinking differently in education changed? Looking at 2022, the new year.
I think it's an interesting one, because there was no doubt. I mean, I've watched, and I often talk about watching a pendulum go backwards and forwards over the centuries between one kind of education and another. And we had, in the last 10 years, moved the pendulum as far as it's possible to go on turning education into numbers and just believing that the only important thing was that we proved our knowledge by answering questions in an exam, which is clearly not the best use of it. But we've got to that point, and things were creaking. Even Ofsted, in their great wisdom, was starting to say those things. And I could really see the shifts in the UK starting to come back. Now, I think the pandemic has somewhat knocked us off a bit. The pandemic has been horrible for large proportions of the population. It has caused all sorts of damage, and it is only natural that now when people are trying to do things, they're trying to get back to a normal. Now, that's quite dangerous when the normal was already unsteady and problematic. And so it worries me that one or two people who were starting to go, you know what, we've got to get a better curriculum, we've got to change the way we teach. It's a bit like, they were agreeing they've got to cross the other side of a river. What the pandemic has done is flooded the river. So now putting your foot in the river, people go, oh, this is frightening and scary. No, let's go back to where we were for a bit. Let's just get our breath back and let's just sort things out. The reality is I don't think we've got time to be doing that. So part of me goes that much as I think the temptation is to go, well, let's just get a steady year under our belts. I think the best we could do as society is to say, okay, it has been horrible, the pandemic, but it offers us a chance. We've now made it clear that if we stop exams, the world doesn't stop spinning. If we actually look at kids learning, they can do it from home. But what's important is that the kids are interested and fascinated. And I recently did about a year, well, just before the pandemic, I did a survey on the Isle of Man when they were looking at how they could improve their education system. And I asked parents, what did they want from the education system? What did they want their kid? What was the absolute, if they got a 3-year-old, what did they want their 3-year-old to know by the time they were 20? And most of the parents were really clear. They said, I don't really care what they know. I just want them to be passionate about what they know. And I think that's a really good point, is that if we haven't got curiosity, passion and wonder in our learning, we've dead behind the eyes. We are doing it for what reason? And if education is only about passing exams, boy, have we got it wrong. Because that would mean the moment you pass your exams, you stop learning. For me, I'm 61 and I learn something new every day. I love finding out things. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't go, wow, because something amazes me. That's what education is. And the best gift we can give to any young person is to give them the wow.
And it's not learning what the 11th longest river is.
Exactly.
Imagine. For those of you who know the Love Tutoring Festival, you'll be delighted to hear that we're back. From Monday the 24th to Friday the 28th of January 2022, the Love Tutoring Festival will return, bigger and better than ever. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, you're in for a real treat. The most loved festival in tutoring, the Love Tutoring Festival is a 5-day online celebration of all things tutoring, with some of the biggest names in tutoring, education and pedagogy, and hundreds of committed and motivated tutors from all 4 corners of the globe taking part. It really is the biggest party in tutoring. We will again be working on a freemium ticket model this year, with all events totally free, apart from our famous and ludicrously inexpensive CPD accredited workshops. You can find out more, including the confirmed speakers so far, how to grab your place, and key information on our wonderful sponsors at qualifiedtutor.org/Love Tutoring Festival. Let's raise standards in tutoring together. So let's pull on that thread a little bit more. Your event at the festival, Love Tutoring Festival 2, is titled Wonder and Curiosity in Learning, and you've just very passionately, may I say, been talking about wonder, curiosity and passion in learning. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how that plays out in your work?
I mean, at Independent Thinking, we've got a number of very talented individuals. We're kind of like the A team, we kind of, everybody does a different type of thing. We don't all repeat our stuff. But one of our people is Dr. Andrew Curran, who's a neuroscientist, and he wrote the book, the little book of big stuff about the brain. And I love spending time with him. And from him, I developed a real passion and interest about the way the brain works. And if it scares me how few educationalists have that passion. If we worked in a garage, you imagine you drive your car into a garage and you go, okay, can you tell me something wrong with the engine? And the person goes, actually, I don't really know much about engines, but yeah, we'll see what we can do. You okay, well, I'm not going to this garage. Yet we go regularly to education establishments where people don't understand what learning is, what actually happens in the brain when you learn something. And what it's done for me by opening up the world of neuroscience. Now, I am not a neuroscientist. People like Andrew have spent their life at it, and it would be insulting to imply that I am. But what I have done is grasped enough neuroscience to understand the basics of what needs to happen for learning. And I mean, crudely, the brain is split into 3 parts. They call it the Triune Brain. It's got many more parts than that, but there are 3 basic areas that people identify. And one of the key areas that's involved in learning is the limbic system. And the limbic system absolutely responds to passion and curiosity and love and wonder and storytelling. And what you can't do is separate that. Yes, of course, we have a large part of the brain, the neocortex, which is about the logical thinking and is about higher order thinking. But if we believe that's what all the learning is, we're completely missing the point. Because the reality is, if you are not interested and not passionate, you are not usually going to remember. The whole thing about learning is not an instant. If I tell you the Latvian word for certainly is labprat, I have to know that because I used to have a friend who's lived there, and you've learned that now, so I can say, okay, I have taught Ludo something, he knows the Latvian word. More or less, certainly by tomorrow, you won't have learnt it because you won't remember it. Certainly 5 or 6 days you won't have done it. Now, is that because I'm a bad teacher? No, it's because when you have thousands of input in the brain every day. The only way you get them into learning is not for me to shout it at you or get cross because you forget it. The way you do is for you to revisit that information, to see it, to be interested, to go, oh, wow, I wonder why, I wonder what. And what the world of curiosity and wonder does is it encourages you to revisit your learning on your own, not because a teacher has told you or a tutor has told you or somebody has said, you need to learn this for the exam, but because you've gone, ooh, I wonder, does that? And I surround myself now, people could see me now, and those of you who come to the workshop will see me bringing various items. I have got on my wall, on my cupboards, everywhere, objects that just make me go, whoa, make me think, make me smile. As I was talking to you earlier, I've got a little puzzle that I'm just turning from being a man into a cube, which is just it's keeping my mind busy. It keeps me wondering what's in the world. When I go outside and I see a flower, I look at a flower and go, God, how did that reproduce? Why? If you you realize that boredom is not something that is given to you. It's something you allow to happen to yourself. There is too many wonderful things around you to be bored. But I understand why young people if we let young people believe that learning is delivered to them in little packages, then of course it's boring. If you let young people realize that learning is what's around them, you kind of, it makes your mind think so differently. And I remember one of the things that Andrew Curran told us when we had one of our associate sessions with him, is he was telling us about how some research recently had discovered that about the only time, most of your life, you have a balance between chemicals like serotonin and oxytocin that calm you down, that you can use if you need to get that space, and dopamine and other chemicals, glutamine, which get you really kind of responding in a bit of an agitated way. And, they're the things that help you when you need that. For most of your life, you can call on that balance between your chemicals. The only time in your life where you have a real misbalance is your teenage years. And in the teenage years, you have a soup of active chemicals which cause your brain to be all over the place. And I said to Andrew, isn't that a bit of bad design to give youths this kind of desire to be different and to push the boundaries and to find their own way? And he said, no, it's probably the main reason we survive as a species. Because back to the point I made earlier, if we just replicate the information, if we did everything our parents had said, and that's all we ever did, generationally, we become completely devoid of new ideas. We become unable to cope with the new world. And so this idea that actually young people that we may be tutoring or looking after, it's very easy to go, oh, why don't you learn? The reality is their brain is hardwired to look at the world differently. Now, I find you give them an object to fiddle, to do, you let them discover, they respond in a whole different way to if you've got somebody standing at the front going, this is what you've got to do. And that's where we've got to reset education and put the power of education back into the person, not into the system.
Yes, is my first response. And my second is, there's a tutor, educator, specialist, interventionist listening to this. What advice do you have on how to implement what you've just said, giving the power back to the learner? How can they do that in a one-to-one session?
Well, yeah, and I mean, if it's one-to-one, and I understand a lot of online, it is more it's more complex. If you're in the same room as someone, then it's a whole lot more exciting and possible. If you are lucky enough to be in a room with someone, then take an object. I see learning transfer by objects, and there is millions of objects, and I'll cover some of them when I'm working with you in a couple of weeks' time. But there are things that you can get them to do in their own home. The reality is it's turning things into the physical. Many young people, because of the effect on their brain, learn best when they are touching and feeling. Simple idea, Mobius strip, and I'll demonstrate this when I do it. The Mobius strip, if you haven't seen it, look it up. If you just get a strip of card or paper, join the ends with sellotape, and you cut it down the middle, so you get two circles. No magic there. If you then repeat that, but this time put one twist in, and then cut down the middle, it's an amazing thing happens. You get one gigantic circle, not two little hoops. You get one big one. If you twist it twice before you sellotape it, so you join the ends of the loop together, but twist it once 180 degrees and another 180, so it's making like a little bracelet, but it's got a double twist in it. Cut down the middle of that, you get two interlocking circles. It's amazing. Now, you can do that with kids, but get them to write something on it first. And whether you're doing English, whether you're doing maths, whether you're doing science with them, whatever you're doing, just the process of them actually looking at and doing the Mobius strip, putting their keywords, linking, cutting it out, getting these two circles or the big circle, whichever you want. Doing that and thinking about it takes it away from being you telling them to them engaging in it. And I think it's any tricks you can do, but it's also get them to go out and take photographs, get them to, and to send you back. Play dumb. I always think one of the best things tutors, I think, sometimes make the mistake of feeling they have to be all knowledgeable. If you say you're all knowledgeable, that hints that you've got all the answers and all they're doing is learning from you. Learn from them. go, yeah, I've never really understood this. Can you explain it from your point of view? How do you see this? And stopping young people believing the only thing that matters is repeating what's in your head. If as a tutor, you are asking questions to get the answer that's in your head, you're missing the point. They might as well not have you. To be effective, you need them to give you the answers that weren't in your head. You need to go, wow, I think you've just blown my mind there, because you've actually, just explain how you got that. Even if they've said something completely wrong, don't shut them down because they haven't got the idea in your head. Increase the idea of wonder that's in their brains. And that's how we do. Make them feel the positive rewards that your brain can do when they know they've done something well. And nothing does that like praise.
And perhaps that's a whole other area is the usage and kind of management of praise in the learning environment. I wish there was another 25 minutes, Dave, to look into that. But if you're listening to this and you think, I think this guest here has a point, then come and see Dave expand on these points in a collaborative, interactive environment as much as that's possible online. Dave and I were talking earlier about some of the kind of relationship changes that take place, the interactive changes that take place when you move from in-person to online. But Dave will be running a highly interactive workshop on Wednesday, the 26th of January, as part of day 3, the big teaching and learning day at the festival. So come and join in for that. As I said, that the title will be Wonder and Curiosity and Learning. If you want to take part in curiosity and learning, then that's the space for you. But just before we finish, Dave, I'd like to ask you, what does 2022 hold for Dave Harris?
It has lots of wonder and curiosity. It has to have, because if it doesn't, then why are we living? So out of whatever the world throws at us, there's going to be some good stuff. And I've got good feelings about 2022. It's got to be better, hasn't it? And I'm looking forward to getting back out in the world more, seeing people, interacting. And I've got a wonder suitcase, which I hope to be traveling around the country with. So maybe I'll get to see some people in person. You can come and have a fiddle with some of my objects and enjoy in my passion.
That sounds like a wonderful plan. That sounds like the next place that you can find Dave in person. I'm sure that the passion and that curiosity is much more highly transmitted or translated even in a physical room. But we'll have to stick with online for a Love Tutoring Festival. It works for us because we're able to bring in an audience from around the world. And Dave is the consummate professional online. So that's your big call to action after this is go and grab your free ticket to Dave's event, which will just be the free pass, which will get you access to every single free event, which includes podcasts, roundtables, keynotes, workshops, all of those, all of the likes. And that is starting on Monday, the 24th of January. So Dave, one final time, thank you very much for taking us through that. A little scientific look as well there with the brain. I hope you enjoyed talking about what you do.
Absolutely, it was a real pleasure to speak to you, and I look forward to hopefully seeing many of the listeners in the webinar in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Dave, and see you all next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Whether you're a regular listener of this podcast or you've just stumbled across it, join the Qualified Tutor Podcast group within the Qualified Tutor community to stay up to date with our latest news, offers, workshops, and of course, simply to meet other tutors like you. Whatever your level as a tutor, our training courses will be the next step in your professional development. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/training to find out more about our CPD accredited and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. Your student deserves the best tutor possible. Make that happen today by joining Qualified Tutor.